It's a new month, which means it's time for another installment of Better Than a Booster, a series where I suggest cards you can buy for less than the cost of a booster pack to upgrade your commander decks. So here are my picks for 10 great commander cards that cost $5 or less. Starting with Irenicus's Vile Duplication. This card's kind of like a clone, but it gives the copy flying and works on legends. Giving you multiple copies of your commander can be really strong. I played this in my Rashmi deck for insane value. Honestly, doubling up most Simic commanders is pretty crazy value now that I think about it, but this card is pretty sweet, especially because it's a sorcery, so you can copy it with things like Twincast. There's only one printing, so I expect it to creep up if they don't print it again soon. Twilight Prophet was an expensive card for quite a while. It's kind of like a Phyrexian Arena that gains you life, which is pretty strong and can be very good in a long commander game. But after some reprints, and especially after its most recent announced reprinting in the commander decks, I think it's high time that I pick one up, and I think you should too. Sticking with the theme of card advantage, back in the day, Mind's Eye was a commander staple. This was one of those cards that went in every non-blue deck. Nowadays we have a lot more card draw, so it doesn't see as much play, but honestly, I decided to throw the card back in my mono red deck to test it out, and I think it's still pretty good. If you plan on going long, which my red control deck does plan to do, drawing 3 or more extra cards a turn cycle is really nice. It's only a few dollars these days and can be really great in a slower, low color deck. I do get that taking turn 5 off is a bit awkward to do nothing, but it draws so many cards. If your meta is slow enough to afford taking turn 5 off, I think it's worth it. Speaking of mono red, Kazuul, Tyrant of the Cliffs is a really neat commander card. He's a red Pillar Fort card, creating a 3/3 for each creature that attacks you unless they pay 3. And unless that attacking creature has trample, this blocks most incoming damage. Anything with less than 3 power is basically useless to attack you, since you get a free 3/3 to block and keep. And 3 mana is actually pretty hefty. If they want to attack you with 2 creatures, your opponent needs 6 mana. Who has 6 mana floating around? Also, Kazuul makes a pretty decent commander. If you want to play cards like Goblin Diplomats, you can force creatures to attack and cause a ton of mayhem. Plus, the card is dirt cheap to pick up. If you've ever been on the receiving end of a Casualties of War, then you know how strong this card can be. Hitting 3 types is really easy. There's almost always going to be an artifact, creature, and land. So worst case scenario, you hit someone's commander, kill a mana rock, destroy a land. But there's probably also at least one enchantment to destroy as well. And then if there's a planeswalker out and you get the legendary 5-for-1, oh my god, it's so much value. And when you get hit by a Casualties of War and they destroy your mana rock, your land, and your commander, it feels rough. This card is very powerful and can set a player back really far. Minas Tirith is a real staple, I think. It enters tapped unless you have a legendary creature, which luckily, there's probably one in your command zone, and then it taps for a color, white in this case, and then it draws cards. If your commander already wanted to attack, it's so easy to trigger this. You only need one other creature to attack, and it's mostly an untapped land, so the opportunity cost is pretty low. Really feels like a no-brainer to play. It's only about $3 now, but who knows when these Lord of the Rings cards are getting reprinted, so I'd pick it up sooner rather than later. For a time in Modern, Neoform was a bit of a boogeyman, and in Commander, I think it's pretty underrated. You sacrifice a creature and then upgrade it for one that costs 1 more mana. If you've ever played with Birthing Pod, you know how powerful this effect can be. If you have a lot of utility creatures, this card's really strong. And if you have a commander that can reduce its mana cost, like Tasigur or Dargo, letting you tutor out a 7-drop or 8-drop can be so very strong. But even playing something like Derevi, which is easy to get out, and tutoring for a 4-drop isn't bad either. It's a tad niche, but it can be really powerful in the right build. Whirlwind of Thought is a crazy kill on sight card. If you want to go off, this is the card to do it. I feel like a lot of people don't realize that Whirlwind of Thought is for any non-creature spell, not just instants and sorceries. You don't need to be Spellslinger for this, although Spellslinger is a good home. But you can play this with artifacts. Some of the new Jeskai artifact commanders would happily play this card. This also goes with enchantments and planeswalkers. Honestly, it goes in a lot more shells than I think people realize. The Jeskai color combination does hold the card back, but it's really powerful. Throne of the God-Pharaoh just barely makes this list at $4.55. But this card is devastating in any go-wide deck. If you attack with 5 1/1s, this does 5 more damage to each opponent. So you're turning 5 damage into essentially 20. That's a damage quadrupler at that point. But it goes beyond that because this is tapped creatures. It has nothing to do with attacking. If you tap creatures for value, you can then turn that utility into extra damage. And it hits each opponent, so you actually get a lot of damage out of this really fast. Since the throne is only 2 mana, it can also come down really early and start pressuring life totals fast. This card is very aggressive and very dangerous. Don't sleep on how powerful it is. Lastly, I wanted to talk about Carpet of Flowers. With its most recent printing, it's now just below $5. Honestly though, outside of CDH, this is kind of a meta call. If you have some friends playing mono blue and you really want to dunk on them, this card is perfect for that. Carpet of Flowers feels extremely overpowered when your opponent is playing only islands. Getting 5 or 6 extra mana 1 or 2 turns in a row can easily win you the game. And don't forget, you can choose which main phase you get the mana. So if you play Carpet of Flowers on main phase 1, you can just pass to main phase 2 and get the mana that turn that you played it. So if an opponent has more than 1 island in play, it's basically a ritual. So those were my budget buys this month, but there are tons more, so let me know some other budget picks in the comments below. And let me know what you think of these picks. Thank you so very much for watching. Subscribe for more.